Hi, I'm Kathy Lewis, CEO of My Four-Year Plan, and I'm really excited today to have Jenni Galbraith, who's the CEO of EIS Kids, and just want to hear more about her background, how she got started in this amazing career as both a developmental specialist and an entrepreneur. So, Jenni, welcome to my segment of Career Snapshots.
Thank you for having me today, Kathy. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so Jenni, I work with some students who have ideas that they might want to pursue a degree in psychology, and oftentimes their parents are reluctant about that, and yet that's the very path that you pursued. So, can you sort of walk us through from going back to the time when you were in high school and you were thinking about psychology? What were sort of some things that you were thinking of in terms of goals and aspirations?
Well, first, I'll agree with you. I believe someone in my family told me it was a belly button degree, that everyone had one. And I disagreed with that because I think that psychology has so many aspects to it that it opened up basically any opportunity I wanted to work. I knew I wanted to work with people. I grew up in a household with two siblings that have a physical disability. And, I saw what PTSD could do to children and families, and their trauma was more medical. We think of PTSD a lot of times as, adults maybe in war or who have been abused, but there's medical trauma too that affects you, that can affect you your whole life. And the mental weight of that. So my mother was really, really good about us always talking about how we felt and seeking help for those types of things. So I just saw the positive aspects of psychology. So when I went to Pitt, I honestly didn't know I was going to do that. I actually registered for health information management because I'm a type A person and I like organization. And I thought that'd be a great fit for me. And I took a few of those classes and I thought, I'm missing something here. And when I really thought about it, I just wanted to be with people. And psychology offered so many different ways to do that. And a lot of people don't want to work in human services because unfortunately it's not up really high on the pay scale a lot of times. But I'm more of an ambitious person, and I thought, nah, I'll find a way to do that. So my classes at Pitt in psychology, my professors were phenomenal. And you can kind of guide your way in that field because there's so many different things to do. I chose child development. So I had more classes based on typical and atypical development of children. And that was fascinating because I had seen my sisters go through therapy my whole life, and I was never a part of that. So I actually had things that I had to deal with that too. And taking all of those classes showed me that was normal and that there were ways to help people going through that. So I got my degree in psychology, and I got my first job actually working as a service coordinator in geriatrics. Wow. Because I couldn't find a job yet that was working with children. And I loved that too. So I learned a lot from that. And it kind of showed me that in the life cycle of the human person, we go from infancy to geriatrics and you kind of circle back. So in a way, I was doing some of the same things I had learned to work with children, the comforting, the making somebody secure, those types of things. And then I was able to find a job being a developmental specialist.
And developmental specialist would be a bachelor's level career, yes. Sort of entry level career?
Yes. There are requirements to do it. You have to have a certain amount of classes that pertain to children, which I did. And then in college, I had worked at the daycare for the School for the Blind. So you have to have a certain amount of years working with children with special needs. So, and really that was just a regular job working, supporting children in a daycare. So
Now, for a person who maybe doesn't understand exactly what a developmental specialist is, can you maybe differentiate how that is separate from occupational or physical therapy?
absolutely. So we follow the same forms, the same plans. So if a child, so I'll take physical therapy because it's a very obvious thing. If you have a child with cerebral palsy and a physical therapist comes into your house and they show the parents how to manipulate and strengthen muscles, a developmental specialist does that cognitively. So if a child is delayed in thinking processes, in speech patterns before two, in social emotional aspects, they have behavior issues, I would go in and follow the same form as was written for if you had a physical disability. This is a cognitive one. So I work with a lot of kids who were on the spectrum, maybe had a diagnosis of Down syndrome because you're automatically chronologically behind. So I would go in and work with the parents to teach them to encourage more learning instead of just letting them regularly develop. We would have more difficult things for them to do so that they would learn and get caught up. The goal of what I did was to catch a child up as high as I could before they went to preschool.
And
Because
is
once
this normally a job that's done in the home then, or is it also done? Okay, it is done exclusively in the home.
there aren't a lot of places who provide outpatient or inpatient therapy for developmental issues. And some of the thing that's different about a developmental specialist is I could work with children who had what was called global delays
Mhm.
because of their environment. So I had children who were assigned through Children and Family Services because their life situation was not conducive to learning.
Sure.
So I could go in and look at the environment, encourage changes to make it more prosperous for them. Um, you can get inpatient and outpatient for OT, PT, and speech in a lot of different places, but there just isn't a place for a global delay or developmentalist.
Okay, so when you say there isn't a place, do you mean that insurance doesn't cover that, or
Correct.
okay, that's it.
So there are different funding sources for what we do. And PTOT, speech, nursing, and no, not nutrition. No, that's it. PTOT, speech, and nursing can be billed through medical assistance
Okay.
and health insurance. But the way our funding sources work for developmental therapy, behavior therapy, nutrition services, vision, and hearing, they are paid for by the county.
Who are
So it's
they?
a service that is provided by the state of Pennsylvania. It is
So,
not billed through a federal funding source.
so there's probably some regulations and criteria that an individual would need to meet to be able to qualify for that. The thing that I have found that's really interesting is that in the past few years, the the move toward terminal degrees in these allied health fields. So in order to become a practitioner of physical therapy, you now have to have that terminal doctorate degree. And by 2027, occupational therapists are going to follow suit, and they're going to have the OTD, which is their terminal degree. So back when you first started as a developmental specialist and you had your bachelor's degree, would that in fact be enough to enable you to do it either from a legal standpoint or a licensure standpoint, or even from a job competitive standpoint?
Yes, and that's still the case today. But I will tell you, we do not have a lot of developmentalists that do not have a master's degree.
I would think so.
Um, it is possible, but because of what you're saying with the licensure, they wanted to make it more competitive and more outlined. So the regulations have become tighter and tighter and tighter. It is still absolutely possible to get a job being a developmentalist with a bachelor's and some of the experiences that I had mentioned earlier. But it's really not, it's the exception rather than the rule.
So now a student would graduate with a master's degree, probably a 2-year program, would you say?
I completed mine, which was a 4-year in 18 months. I went through the summer.
Okay, so this graduate student would then come out, and is there a practicum or clinical hour requirement to get some sort of a certification or licensure?
We did have practicums in grad school. I
Okay.
had to, the way my degree worked was I specialized in birth to 3, but the actual degree goes up to 8 years. So
Okay.
I had to do a practicum in home for birth to 3. I had to do one in a preschool, 3 to 5. They're called the Mawas of Pennsylvania. Um, and then I had to do one, and I did mine at Pittsburgh Public Schools in what was called a mosaic classroom, which they don't have anymore, but it was an integrated classroom with typical and atypical development children. So in order to get my degree, I had to do that. And I
Okay,
had
so
to,
it's just to check the degree box. There's not necessarily a governing body that requires licensure or certification.
not right now, but Pennsylvania is working on that.
I bet they are.
Yes.
Yes.
And we're
Yeah.
actually, our company is one of the companies piloting the criteria for it. We're building the curriculum.
So there's a lot of students who are drawn to fields that require caring for other people, but they might not want to become a doctor or a PA or a nurse or any maybe even OT and PT, but maybe they want to have maybe the cleaner aspects of helping other people, right? And so would you kind of put that profile around this kind of program for a student who wants to help other people? What do you see as the typical profile as someone entering this field?
That was me.
Okay.
I feel like a lot of the other, I mean, they're all so useful, but when I kind of looked at, and as a developmentalist, you do take certain classes that expose you to OT, PT, speech. They were called modules. We had to do those in case you wanted to shift where you were going. And personally, I felt they were more rigid. So the strategies that you're working on, and some people absolutely love them. Like I have people that work for me that like, they just love sensory. So they are OTs. They love it. I looked more toward the overall development of a child and the family interactions and helping the whole family, which is what a developmentalist really does. And it was so much more open to the things that I wanted to do to help them. And we could do all kinds of different things, you know, we played games, we took field trips down the street, those types of things. And I met so many different people and so many children, and being able to see them globally delay instead of maybe just seeing them swallow correctly
Mhm.
or cruise along a couch. I worked on those things too, but on top of that, I also worked on hugging your parents and, you know, being able to talk on the phone with grandma, those kinds of things, and interacting. So I really see the developmental part of it as a more overall field.
So before you talk about your master's degree, would a person that would be pursuing this get a counseling psychology master's degree, or what would the prescribed or best scenario master's degree look like?
So I received a master's degree from the University of Pittsburgh that specialized in early intervention because I knew I wanted to do that. There are only 4 programs in the United States that have them.
Really, and what are those 4 programs?
There's one in Illinois, there's one in Virginia, there is Pitt, and I think the other one is in New York.
Okay, are the ones in Virginia, is that the University of Virginia or?
I believe it was, I can't remember what it is, but I could get you that information. But
Yeah.
there are only 4 places where you can get a specific degree in early intervention. And the thing that's interesting about early intervention, the field that I chose to work in for the last mumble years, is that it's very specific to little ones,
Okay.
is what I wanted to do. Um, you can get all kinds of different degrees, but this field, a lot of people don't know, is part of the IDEA Act, which is part of the Americans for Disabilities Act. So it is a protected and mandated service. Every state has to provide it for children with developmental delays, birth to 3, in home. Now, they say at no cost, but that's not true. There are some states that have a copay. Pennsylvania does not. If you can believe this, Pennsylvania is one of the most progressive states for early intervention.
Wow.
They have backed it from the beginning. We have our own bureau, which is unbelievable. That just happened 6 years ago. We are under the Office of Child Development and Early Learning, OCDEL, and then we have a bureau director just for EI.
So how many hours would they permit for what length of time in terms of the funding? Like, would you see a patient once every?
Usually it's once a week for an hour.
And then how long does that go on?
If they come in, I've had kids that I worked with that came in at 6 to 8 weeks because they were born with a diagnosis, and I followed them until they were 3 years old.
And do you see the joy of just marked improvement over the time of your work with them?
It's unbelievable. This is a great kind of personal story. One of the people who works at my company is phenomenal. She was my first employee. I was the developmentalist for her son, and he's now 19. So when I see him, I had seen him when he was 8 weeks old, and I helped him, and I helped her and her family with all the strategies. And there were different things that, other professionals had said, oh no, there's no way he's going to do this, because there's a dichotomy in this. You have a lot of medical professionals who see things only one way. And what I did, I'm basically a problem solver, which is why I like this, because you look at something and you have to figure out for each individual child, each individual family, what works best for them. Mm-hmm. And I remember saying, well, that's not true. We're going to work on this, and we'll get this done. And he's graduating from high school this year. It's phenomenal to see that.
That's incredible.
Talk about when he was a baby.
That's amazing. So a person who really just enjoys that sense of helping other people, this would be a great field for them, but they should probably know that they're going to be looking at a master's degree. And if they can't do the early intervention program somewhere, could they get a master's degree in psychology and sort of step into it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You can have a master's degree in psychology. Like I said, try to get that child development part of it, because you will have a certain number of curriculum hours that you'll have to have focusing on young children. We have people who have regular education degrees.
Okay.
That went to be a teacher, and then either it wasn't for them or they couldn't find a job and realized, oh, I could work with little ones too. But again, that experience with young children with special needs is a requirement. But we had someone who was a reading specialist that dipped her toe in early intervention and loved it. And she had enough experience going through the school system and preschools that she qualified to work for us. So there's a very wide range of things you can do.
Now, with the rising cost of college, there's a lot of people, myself included, talking about return on investment, right? Because the average in-state cost of education for 4 years really can range anywhere from $100,000 to $160,000 inclusive. And the idea is that, you shouldn't graduate with more debt than what you can make your first year out. And as you said at the beginning of the conversation, psychology was like the belly button degree. Everybody had one. Yes. And if we look at the pay scale, it's not always historically been the greatest. But if a person graduates and becomes an early intervention specialist, like, what kind of a starting salary might that person be able to achieve in some sort of either clinical environment or anything in this realm?
Well, the great thing about where I work is was a developmentalist. I worked for a larger company. They did not pay a lot.
Okay.
But we sort of changed that when my company came in. There hadn't been a new early intervention company in 25 years in Allegheny County or anywhere else. And we kind of influenced not just us, but other companies to be more competitive and pay more.
Wow.
So the great thing about how we work is if you work and see 25 to 30 kids, I have a developmentalist who makes over $100,000 a year.
That's fantastic. Now you've sort of teased the audience with my company and when I started. And so you're not just an early interventionist, you're also an entrepreneur. So you actually finished your master's degree, and not long after that, you saw this need. You said that there hadn't been a new one started in 25 years in Allegheny County. So did you have a light bulb moment one day? How did you decide to jump off of that courageous entrepreneurial cliff?
So this is, it was one moment. I was working for a company, a large company, one of the only ones that was in Pittsburgh. And I was making $11.80 an hour.
Okay.
And I was an employee, so I was assigned child after child, and I was seeing 35 kids, which if you add it up, it's more than a full-time job, because we consider a full-time job as 25 direct hours a week. So you're seeing about 5 kids a day.
Sure.
And then we reimburse for admin time in between that and travel. And I was at a family's house, and the mom said, "Oh, here, I think this came for you." And it was a statement from the state of Pennsylvania that showed her they have to disclose what the state has paid for your services for you. And I looked at it, and they were being reimbursed a lot more than I was making. And I said, "Oh, no, this is actually for you. This is just showing you where the funding was coming from and how much it costs for your services, but you don't have to pay for it. You can keep it or not." And then I thought, I'm being taken advantage of. And that day, I decided that wasn't going to happen anymore. I was going to change that. So I incorporated myself, and I talked 3 people that I went to grad school with into working for me.
Overnight. So did that mean leaving that job, no benefits for a while, like sort of that fearful place where
I had nothing. I took a loan out for $27,000. And
these 3 people did the same thing?
Kind of, because they knew I was going to pay them. If anybody was going to lose it, it was going to be me, because I was going to pay them. But and I shouldn't say it just happened in a day. I had to read all the regulations. I had to learn what the laws were of what Pennsylvania could and couldn't do. So I researched that for a while and gathered information from where I worked with people that I knew. And I figured out that in the regulations, if a family chooses you, the state of Pennsylvania cannot deny you providing the service because you are qualified. If you're qualified, which I was, I checked off all the boxes, crossed the T's, dotted the I's. So I basically forced my way into Allegheny County.
Now, how do you then? Sure. Then how do parents find out then about which companies they can work with?
So all of our referrals go through one company, and then it's divided from there. Who can take it, who cannot. They're the referral source. And basically, because I was a developmentalist, the parents that I worked with were able to choose me.
Okay, so
that's how it started. And then my name was on the list for referrals.
Sure. And then it was almost like you didn't have to do any direct marketing, which is fortunate, because as a small business, that's a lot of the initial budget is the marketing.
Yeah. It was just me.
That's amazing. So what year was that if you
That
could,
was 2003.
okay, so 17 years ago you start this company with 3 employees and so where like not only
So
where
then,
are you now, but also like because you're a business owner, that kind of changes the nature of your daily job, right? Because it's like you have a passion for intervention specialization, but now you find yourself wearing the hat of a business owner.
well, I was a developmentalist even through owning the company for the first couple of years. But I realized in that there was a little more in me than um, just the helping part.
Okay.
I, like I said, I am a type A person. I grew up with very little. My dad was a steel worker. He lost his job when we were little. So I remember thinking, I'm not going to live like this.
Mm.
So there was that like fire part of it. And I just thought I could make this better for people who are therapists like myself and for the families that we serve. We could be within the regulations a little more flexible. We can work on evenings, we can work weekends, we can, whatever was helpful to the family as long as the employee was willing to do that. And there are people who have other jobs, but they still want to do what we do. So they work part-time in the evenings or on the weekends. Um, I'm not going to say that it was easy because the county did not want me here.
Oh.
So I had to they actually tried to shut me down here. So what I did was in Pennsylvania, there are 4 regions and each one has its own director for EI. So what I did was I reached out to someone in the central region of Pennsylvania because they had no interaction with anybody over here. And I opened a branch of our company over there.
Interesting.
And I built it there to the point where I could sustain Allegheny, which is a much larger county, which was my goal. Now I had the contract, even though they didn't want me here, but getting referrals after a while was difficult.
Is this a
But
bureaucratic issue, Jenny?
yes,
Yes.
yes,
So there was
I work
probably
with government.
some long established relationships that other providers had with them,
Oh
and
yeah.
maybe there was some back scratching going on.
Well, I actually, when I called another county, they said to me, "Oh, I'm sorry, we can't give you a contract. We received a phone call from so and so, who I used to work with, and we're just not going to do that."
And so how did you overcome that?
So what I did was, when we moved to the central region of the state, I built really strong relationships there,
Sure.
and because the capital is there, that is where all of the things for our department come out. We were able to pilot programs. We built a business name for ourselves there so that when we came back here, we had maintained it in a small sense here to keep our contracts. But basically, I ended up having the director of the bureau contact and force the county to change the referral system.
Like, what a go-getter you are.
I know. There are probably people today that are still like, oh, this one,
But it's a fabulous story not to give up on your dreams and
Yes.
not to be afraid to push barriers. I think, when I talk to people who are interested in starting businesses, they say, well, if they've never done it, I don't know what's entailed, so I'm not going to pursue it, or I'm afraid of the legal or the marketing or any number of other aspects. And it's almost like you have to like just jump in the water for the
Yeah.
first time, and then it's like, oh, okay, I've done this before. And that's probably how it was for you once you started working, with all of these counties and you started gaining your sense of place in the space, I might say, right?
Yeah. And I will always say my mother taught me this, that if you don't know what you're doing, there's always somebody who does. So make friends with them and ask them. So
Exactly.
if
And
I didn't know how to do something, I found someone who would relate to me and I got them to help me.
well,
And
and
that's how
you
I
have such
worked
a
all of
great
that.
personality that it just, who's
Yep.
not gonna wanna help you? You know, you're a go-getter, but yet you bring such a sense of diplomacy and gentleness and kindness with, a heart to really wanna
Yep.
help other people ultimately. Now, how big is your company today?
So today we work in 13 counties across Pennsylvania. We see more than 1,000 children a day, and we have about 100 employees.
That's amazing.
Yes.
That must
So
be so exciting, and I know that that represents a lot of sleepless nights for you.
yes, but my husband works with me too. He used to work at Mellon Bank. He worked in investments. And when we got large enough that we needed somebody over here for the financing, we thought, well, let's just do that. So the two of us, I do have him, but there are a lot of times where it's all on me. I make every decision that
Yep.
impacts this company, and I'm okay with that because um, I'm more strong-willed like that, which I think if you are looking to go into business for yourself, just know how strong you are and stick to it. Um, it's not always been easy, but the benefits that I get from it are well worth those sleepless nights
So if a
because
person
they're not as big as they used to be.
right, because 'cause you've been through the hurdle so
Yeah.
many times. So if a
Yes.
person just wanted to go into business and pretend that they didn't even, want to do anything that was health related,
Yeah.
the thing that you have though is that you really have two specialties. You have the specialization of now being a successful business owner, plus you have that specialization from the EIS, the early intervention specialist standpoint. But would you say that for many people, it's ideal if you're going to pursue business that you have some sort of context of
Yeah.
specialization? Hmm.
Yes. It doesn't matter what it is. If you design shoes or you do computer programs or you do whatever it is, whatever you're doing, whatever, make sure that it's something you want to do. Because everything that I fought for was something that I believed in because I was what I fought for. I was a developmentalist. I wanted to do that. But if it was anything else, making candles, software engineer, if that was my passion, I would know it and then I would go out and be better than the rest of the people.
I just love it. I love every bit of the story from start to finish. It's exciting, and I think it's inspirational to students who are sort of standing at the finish line of high school and thinking about what does my future look like, and it just gives students an opportunity to see what are the possibilities, because I know when they come to me for guidance about the college and career planning, we're having those meaty discussions about not only this major, because if we're only concerned with a college major, we're not really thinking holistically the way that we need to be. I want to be able to take students far beyond that, sort of on a ride to see, okay, let's peek behind the curtain and let's see what some of these careers can look like. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and
I
that's
think that no matter what your major is, whatever you decide to do, the opportunity is what you make it.
absolutely. And you are a testament of somebody who's like
Yes.
really shot out like a bullet. And also, I think an encouragement to the student who does want to major in psychology and who's
Yes.
very concerned or hearing from their parents, the 10 reasons maybe why they shouldn't do that. So, like, this really helps, substantiate that, as long as they're willing to, get that master's degree
Mhm.
or get the back end experience of what they're going to need to be able to do something with that, right?
Absolutely. I think that I never once in my life have said, "Oh, I really regret getting my bachelor's in psychology." Because the other thing about psychology that I love is, yes, I specialize a little bit in the child development part, but everything that I learned there helped me work with the people that I needed to get what I needed from.
That's fantastic.
So, in psychology, I learned about adult learning. I learned about making relationships, what makes people tick, what makes
Mm.
them get to your side, what makes it, and I was able to use that myself, even with difficult people.
I bet you were.
And as an adult, I had to learn that because I'm a little strong-willed, and when I was younger, would try to like force things. But once I learned all of this, I realized, everybody has something different that makes them tick. And my psychology classes were so beneficial in that way.
So if a student was going to pursue the EIS, early intervention specialist field, is there like sort of a major website that they should look at for more information just about this field as a whole?
Yes. And I can send you the link. The Pennsylvania Early Intervention link explains exactly what it is and what it does, but they can also go to my website. We have a description of what each early intervention specialist does. So there's one for OT, there's one for PT, there's one for developmental, and it shows exactly, it's basically explaining to families what we would do. But if you're a student thinking, oh, maybe this is something that I'm interested in because I've never heard of this before, you can go on there and read like exactly what do we do with families.
And this is eiskids.org, right?
.com.
.com. So EIS as in Sam, kids.com.
Yes.
That's fantastic. And then you had said there's, for the Pennsylvania information, but what if somebody is from another state? Like, is there
Every state has it.
Okay.
Every state you could Google. If you live in Illinois, you can say Illinois Early Intervention.
Okay.
And it will come up.
It's a great resource.
And the thing about it is wherever you go to school, every state is different. We're a Commonwealth, so we function differently than, say, West Virginia, which is not.
Sure.
So West Virginia has what they're called regions, but if you're an EI specialist there, you can work in any of them. You just sign up, you have to go through all the qualifications and find the company that you're going to work with or be an independent contractor yourself. Pennsylvania and Ohio are different because they function by counties.
Sure.
And in Pennsylvania, we're basically made up of 67 little states.
Okay.
So every county we work with is different. So the thing that's nice about working for someone like me is I went to each one of the counties and figured out how does this work in this county, and then you just come and work and we already have it ready for you.
It's amazing what you've accomplished. I mean, congratulations for
Thank you.
all you have accomplished. It's exciting. And I think especially for young entrepreneurs who just have an interest in sort of breaking through that barrier, to hear the testimonies and stories of those who have gone before them, to take the risk and then to realize the rewards of that. So thank you so much for sharing your story. It's exciting.
Thank you for having me. And I should add one more thing, Kathy. I think they should know. I started my company when I was 26. I wasn't working for years and years and years and years. So I was very young, and that was something that was a little bit of a hurdle also, but you just keep working through that.
Sure. That's amazing. Well, so Jenni Galbraith from eiskids.com. Thank you so much for being
Thank you for having me, and good luck to everyone.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathy.